Welcome to Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs, the podcast that gives you an unfiltered behind-the-scenes look at what it's really like being a woman in the middle who's over 50 and following her entrepreneurial dreams. Grab a superhero cape, girlfriend, because you deserve one. I'm your host, Master Certified Life Coach and Midlife Mentor, Suzy Rosenstein, and I am excited to inspire you with interviews that feature all of this midlife amazingness. Let's go. Hey there, welcome back to the show. We have another really exciting interview ahead of us about intentionally creating a business proactively instead of reactively. What a concept, right? Today you'll be meeting Sarah Davies, a woman in the middle entrepreneur who helps creatives, coaches, and consultants turn their knowledge and expertise into profitable business using a logical, phased approach. So civilized. Welcome to the show, Sarah. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I'm serious. It's a very civilized approach. Now, I know we're going to have a great conversation about your midlife entrepreneur story. We're going to be talking all about your business and what's going really well, and also what midlife issues might be getting in your way to some extent, might be challenging you, might be causing you a big pain in the, whatever is going on with you. We got to know. So let's start out with how old you are, how long you've been an entrepreneur, what you do in the world, like your story and what it is that you do. Take it away.
Okay, so I am 51 and I think that maybe I was born an entrepreneur. So I had my first business when I was 8 years old, which was selling quail's eggs to delicatessens and restaurants in my hometown where I used to live in England.
Wait, you were selling quail eggs?
Yeah.
Okay, I do a lot of interviews and nobody else has said that.
I know. And it's funny actually, because whenever I have clients join my Facebook group, is one of the questions I ask is, how did you first start earning money outside of pocket money? And all these things come up, but it is quite unusual and I absolutely loved it. It was office hours were from when I came home from school until Grange Hill, which is a kids' TV program, started. So short office hours, and Tuesdays I would take my orders and then go and drop off all the eggs. And I had my dad had a hobby poultry farm. So that's where the quails originally came from. And I even had these special egg boxes that were for quail size eggs. And so it was 50p for a box. And then I would go and do the deliveries. And sometimes the restaurants or the customers would ring because they'd run out and I'd have to do a special order. And it was just like, that was so exciting for me. And so that was my very first business.
Now, how were you taking these eggs around? Did you need help from your parents? Were you riding your bike? You were only 8. What were you doing?
Yeah. So I grew up in the absolute wops in a place called Gundleton that has a telephone box and a letterbox. And it was about a 30 to 40 minute walk to the nearest regular bus, which was only once an hour. The bus where I lived only came once a week on a Tuesday morning to take people, the elderly ladies to the nearest town to do their shopping. So yes, I needed my parents to help me with deliveries.
Oh my gosh. You never know what a guest is going to say. That's for sure. I didn't see that one coming.
But it was amazing. And it was so imperfect. The business never had a name. I never even thought to give it a name. Didn't have a name. It didn't have headed paper. It didn't have all the things that keep people stuck getting ready, but it solved a problem. It offered a perfect solution. It was for a specific audience. And yeah, and obviously the messaging was right. Quail's eggs, and it was a delicacy in England. The quail's eggs were a delicacy. So they could add them to their dishes, and they probably loved telling their customers that they bought them from an 8-year-old.
It's just the cutest little story. And so that got you excited. Yeah. And then where did you go from there?
So then from there, I traveled a lot when I was in my early 20s, and I went through the agency world. I studied advertising, marketing, and public relations, worked in the agency world. And then when I'd had my first daughter, so I was at home, and I got really, really into vegetable gardening. And by this time I was living in New Zealand, and there had been a real resurgence of growing your own. It was like everybody was doing it. I was just ahead of the curve, and I had become, I think, actually just going into motherhood, and it was something I felt that I could control.
Yeah.
I went a little bit extreme with it. What started out as a hobby ended up with us being self-sufficient. And, I ripped down the carport and created a potager, and would basically everything that we ate, all the vegetables came from the garden. And I would go out and see what was ready and then decide what to cook. So it was quite a different way of living. And then, friends were asking me, why isn't this growing? And then their friends were ringing up. And I just, one insomniac night, saw a gap in the market for coming home and having a beautifully customized raised bed with a planting plan, with a fail-safe plan that you could use to grow your own veggies. And so I started this business called Patch from Scratch. And this was before, in New Zealand, you couldn't buy a kit set in, the local hardware store. So this was, and it was a high, it was a high-end product. It was nearly like a piece of art. People would have them. I had a carpenter, and they would be, in a diamond shape or a potager or whatever. And so I ran that business for about 3 or 4 years whilst I was at home with my kids. And I had just fantastic opportunities because it was such a thing in New Zealand. We have a big home show here where once a year. And so, I was lucky enough to be the feature of the home show for a couple of years running, where I got a huge stand for free in exchange for talking once an hour on the hour for 12 hours for 4 days. And I did that once while I was pregnant and another time while I was breastfeeding. So It was crazy times, but I loved it. And I was creating something that didn't exist. And so there were no rules. And that's what I wanted. Was I had been working in agencies. I had been delivering for clients, but there's often a compromise, and you come up with an amazing idea and then the client's like, oh, we just want to stay safe. So this was my chance to just go for it. And yeah, it was great. It was a great success. And then I got to a point where I had 3 preschoolers, and it just wasn't working anymore. And it wasn't going to work. I couldn't be the mother that I wanted to be. And so I sold that business. But what then happened was, with all the media coverage that I had got, I'd had a great relationship with my suppliers. So I had a compost supplier who was very, very good to me. They were actually in another part of the country, but they'd often do a trip up to Auckland for a special delivery for me. Or if I was doing a project for a charity or something, then they would donate materials, etc. And they came to me and said, would you do our marketing? And so, and also with all the media coverage, I'd always make sure that their product was, in the shot. And it was just what you do, right? It's just laws of reciprocity. And so then that started me on another journey in establishing my own agency. So we were very strong in horticulture, because once you get one and then another, and we had great contacts for that sector, and also services, so professional services, which I really, really enjoyed. And so I built that agency up, and it was going really well. But I think on reflection, I was serving too many different types of clients. So I was dealing with corporates, big clients, but also, smaller SMEs. And yeah, so stretched too thin. And also it wasn't coming from my heart. It was coming as a response to opportunities that were given to me. And so that's where the kind of reactive came in, as opposed to that first business, which was really proactive. And anyway, when my husband and I got married, we had promised each other we would let each other follow our dreams. We would support each other. And for the first 10 years, he didn't actually appear to have any dreams, which was going pretty well for me because I had loads. And then he came home one day and said he had been offered an opportunity in Singapore and really wanted us to go with the children, which I would like to say that I embraced him and said, that's wonderful, congratulations. But the truth is I went absolutely ballistic. However, at the end of the day, we went to Singapore. I sold that agency. And whilst I was over there, it was actually a really good time for me to just just to take stock and decide what I wanted to do with my life and what was working and what wasn't working. And to really, I'd always been a working mum. So then I wasn't, which was actually really weird for me because I had always worked, even as a teenager. And then when I came back, what I really wanted to do was work with the small end of small business. And when I had that agency, that wasn't financially viable because we were doing the implementation. But often I would be working with a marketing team or, some kind of team. It's quite different when you're working with the business owner, with the passionate business owner. And so, when I returned, then that led me to establishing a different way of working where I teach my clients the business skills that they need. So the type of people I work with are really, really good at what they do. They have the knowledge and expertise, but they don't have the business skills necessarily. Maybe they've never had to find their own clients, or navigating a sales conversation has them running for the hills, that kind of thing. So that has led me here.
Wow. And then, so how did you narrow it down? Who was your first client?
So my first client as a coach I was really lucky. When I first came back from Singapore, a few of my old clients reached out to me, and I started off, just doing freelancing and doing the implementation for them whilst I then grew the coaching on the side. And so one of my first clients was a builder's company, a building company. I've since niched down even from there that I now work with creatives, coaches, and consultants, because that's where I know that I can get them the best results. And just looking at, there's some industries like a building industry. I know that there's a couple of trades coaches in New Zealand, and I think they've got much better, they know about the quoting platforms, for example, that builders can use. And so they can offer them something better than what I can. But in terms of marketing with that company, it was really great, but also just learning more and more about where I want to be.
That's the thing about being this age, is we get pretty clear about what it is that we want. And it's very common to not be in the mood to tolerate what you don't when it comes to limited time and having this time sensitivity. There's a bit of urgency and desire to really focus in. And it sounds like that's what you were ready to do. That's amazing. So what has come up for you with midlife challenges and how they kind of get in the way of running your business the way you want?
Yeah. So midlife challenges. So one of the challenges our family has been my mother moved to New Zealand to retire, and then she was diagnosed with dementia. So that was really challenging, just trying to get her diagnosed, but also the fallout from that. It's very hard on the family. It's something that I'm still struggling to come to terms with, to be honest, and just knowing if she could say, I often think, wow, if you could see yourself now, it's a really, really sad disease. But at the end of the day, she is really happy. She is really content. She is really happy. Hasn't always been like that. She's definitely went through stages where, she really struggled. She felt unsafe. There was once when she ran away from the rest home and managed to convince a bus driver to let her on the bus.
Why?
So she's a bit of a rebel at heart, because she was convinced that she was in a experimental unit and that she was, the next person to be experimented on.
Wow.
So that's, really horrible for her and challenging to deal with, because in that state for her, she was really convinced it was her truth. Yeah. So I'm lucky that she lives really close by. I managed to get her into a home that is less than a kilometer away. And so I can go there really frequently. My kids can, they go there on their own now that they're teenagers. They can cycle down and visit her, which is great. Yeah, really, really great. Just before it was just, she had just gone into the rest home. And one of the things that she remembered was that I promised I would take her back to England for one last visit. And I have to say, traveling with 3 children and my mother for a month, it was essentially a round the world trip. We went to Singapore, we went to all over England and then to the States where we also had family over a month. And it just about broke me. But it was kind of like one of the best and worst experiences, because I was the only responsible adult in the party.
How did you manage your work? A month is a substantial time to take off.
Yeah. So at that time, I actually just stopped everything. At that time, I was transitioning into the coaching. And so with my clients where I was freelancing, I just put everything on hold for a month. And that's actually a blessing that you're able to do that when you've got your own business. And I think that the more systems you have set up, the easier that is. And that's definitely something that I have embraced, as time has gone on is, well, I think actually there's a fine line between systems and automation working for you, but not too much where you're like, can I just speak to a person?
Yeah.
And so I was able to take time out from the business to do that and to recover afterwards as well, because I didn't come back and just bounce back into the office.
Yeah. No, thanks for being honest about that. Now, one thing you mentioned in your notes I find very, very common, and it's not having easy connection with friends when you're in full-blown entrepreneur mode, and also when you have heavy family obligations with whatever age. So I know you still have some kids where you're driving around.
Yeah,
it takes up a lot of time. So what's that like for you with losing connection with people?
Yeah, well, I think for me, when I was in Singapore, I actually had time. For once in my life, I had time, and I developed these deep, deep friendships. I found the best friends, ever in my life. And so to then transition home to New Zealand in itself was really difficult. So I actually think it's really difficult coming back into a community that you have left, because a lot had changed and I had changed too. And so then it was really reestablishing myself from that point to have a community and finding the right people. And something I've, with my girlfriends in Singapore, everybody's left now. And yeah, I think pretty much everybody's left and gone home some moved on to another expat position, but most went home. And the key that I think is about finding people who have an emotional space in their life, because you can meet great people that you gel with and click with, but if they don't actually have an emotional space to have a good friend and to, so that you can support each other, then they just don't have that space. And, that was something that I learned to understand. And then eventually I did find my dear friend, Janelle, and she had that space because she was actually, kind of in a changing careers herself, changing how she was working. And so she did have that space. And one thing that I'm always grateful for is that she will make sure that we connect, even if I forget, because a week just flies past, right?
Yeah, it's true.
And so, making sure that we have coffee, that we talk, we usually go to Pilates together once a week. And just when you don't have that, I mean, I really like all my clients. And I would be friends with any one of them, but you also need something outside of that, or I do, to fill my cup.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And so it is really, it's just that person who says, hey, how did that meeting go? Or I don't know, if I've had a fight with one of the kids or something, that who do you talk to about that? And who's your 3 a.m. person that you can?
Yeah. This has come up so much, Sarah. It's come up a lot working with midlife women over the last 10 years, because sometimes we take these friendships for granted. And then in midlife, there are a lot of changes that go on with a lot of people are moving, their priorities change, marriages break up, lots happens. And if you're not mindful, it can be easy to be a little sloppy with the friends you have and not that motivated or know how to create new friends at this part of life.
Yeah.
So it's actually one of the reasons that I have a social component in my signature program, the Women in the Middle Academy, because I didn't recognize that there was so much of a need, but there really is. And the women I work with are really, they're in the, they're over 50 and they're really looking for connection and deeper friendships because we do coaching. So it's very, people are vulnerable and they're connecting and cheering each other on, and it's safe. And not all friends want that. Not all friends are good at that. It's not part of all friendships to be deep or to be vulnerable, it's different.
That's very true. And that is something that I've identified with some of my friends, and, that I respect, is that I actually, when I was younger, I was very much behind a facade, but now I'm kind of the opposite, where I see real strength in vulnerability, and and maybe sometimes it's too much, for some people. And I get that. I do get that for some people, they don't want to, or they can't, they're not in a place where they can share with that vulnerability, but their cup may be filled with how they are living. And that's totally cool. It's really about just everybody finding what works for them.
Yeah. And being aware of what you're wanting, and taking responsibility to work on it. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
So I love to ask what you've noticed about being an older woman and being an entrepreneur. What have you noticed? I know one thing you talked about in your notes is confidence. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think I do. I have developed a confidence. Like I'm so damn sure of, who my ideal clients are, who I'm here to serve, the results that I can get them. And also the vibe, like the type of person that I want to work with and that I want in my programs. Because, for example, we do mini mastermind pods in the program where they're meeting in small pods. So you want to have the right people. You want to have the right people in those pods so that everybody feels that it's enjoyable. And so I don't have a fear or a feeling of missing out to turn somebody away who's not right for the program, or who I don't think I'm the right person for them. And sometimes that does happen. I just don't think I'm the right person. And I'm, confident to say that, because I want the best for them too. I want the best for everybody. And so, it's a confidence that has grown as I have got more clarity myself, because often as entrepreneurs, like I can do a lot of different things, but it's about honing down on what really fills my cup and being intentional in who I want to work with, how I want to work with them, and what's also going to work for me so that I don't get burnt out.
Definitely.
And that's something that, especially during COVID, I was working with a lot of clients, one-to-one, and getting really frazzled. And that's another thing that I've noticed as I've got older. When I was younger, I could multitask. When I worked in agency back in my 20s, I was looking after, a heap of different accounts. I would know what was going on with each account down to the detail, the last phone call, what I was waiting for, but I'm not like that anymore. I don't have that capacity, but I do have my trusty notebook, which holds,
absolutely,
which holds everything.
Now,
and
I know
also
this oh, go ahead. Sorry.
This feeling of like, I used to be very much like, dig deep, push through. But now I'm kind of like, I'm going home to meditate for half an hour.
I love that. Now, your program is called Beyond the Hourly Rate. Tell me why you decided to go with that name.
Because that's the result. There's so many people who have their own businesses who are not actually, it's not profitable. It's not scalable. There's kind of stuck in that, trying to be everything to everyone, going around in circles and not really understanding why it's not working. And so the program, it actually took me about 3 years to figure out the strategy so that it could serve people wherever they're at in their business journey. And so during phase 1, we work out the strategy and see where the gaps are. And for people who are just starting out, then they're going to be all gaps. So then they go through this logical phased approach from step 1. If for people who are more established, then they're going to be filling in the holes, looking through and going, okay, have I got this in place? does this work, and then filling the gaps. And so it actually works for people wherever they're at in their journey. So I've got people in the program now. I've got one lady who's had her business for 25 years and another lady who's at idea stage, who's just starting up, and it doesn't actually matter. And so, so it's about actually creating a business that is aligned to you, aligned to your values. And that's actually where we start with the program, is what are your values? And then we use them as one of the key indicators for decision making. Because that's another thing I find with entrepreneurs. It's like, well, I could do this and I could do this. So we've got to make a decision, even if it's just to say, this is where I'm focusing for the next 6 months, or else it's all a bit, scattered and diluted.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And I've had to do that too, where I was spinning on a program idea for 2 years. And finally, I'm just like, I'm just going to try it. Yeah. So I ran the program through for 14 weeks and it went well, but I could see that it wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't my favorite place to work, in that area. And that was very telling. And then that became like, once that decision was made and we worked it through, then that became a real clue for me to get really clear on what I did want. And I was able to make the next decision. I just made a decision recently too, where I'd also been thinking about it for 2 years. And I'm just like, you know what? I think now's the time, based on a value. Like, I give it a try. I'm not going to lock myself in. I'm just going to give it a try.
And I think I think that's another thing, is that decisions are not final. It doesn't have to be. If we're waiting for the right decision, it might never come. But it's about just what I say to my clients is, about like Parkinson's law. If you give yourself all the time in the world, then you'll take all the time in the world. If you say to yourself, by next Tuesday, 5 p.m., I'm going to have made a decision on this, and then I'm going to move forwards from that point, then you will actually make a decision by that time.
Yes. And making a decision moves you forward. Staying in spin keeps you stuck. And when you're stuck, you're not making decisions. You're not learning anything else. You're just like complaining and spinning.
And we have to we have to go through the messy middle of trying something out that maybe works or maybe doesn't work, to at least you're moving forwards. At least you can then say, okay, well, that didn't work. And it may then the ideas unfold where you go, okay, that didn't work, but it's actually given me a great idea for how it could work.
That is so exciting. I love that part of being an entrepreneur and not, having to convince your manager and the director that this is a good idea and spending somebody else's money and never getting it. This is much more fun. So what would you say your main focus is right now in your business and in your life? Is it promoting the Beyond the Hourly Rate program?
Yeah. So my main focus is to grow the program so that more people know about the program and know about the work that I do, whether that's through holding workshops, doing interviews, speaking at conferences for, like associations where there's lots of small business owners. So it's on in my professional life. It's about focusing on the audience growth. And then in my personal life, it's really about, I have 3 teenagers now, and the first one's already left home. And I'm just really conscious of wanting to be present and be there and enjoy this period with them. And I just find them absolutely fascinating.
Yes.
In a good and a bad way.
Yes.
But I just think, wow, I would love to be able to be at school with them and just see what they're like, and I don't know if they'd want to be at school with me, but it's a really awesome stage of life. And I'm also just really conscious that not that time is running out, but that in 5 years' time they may have all flown the nest.
Yeah, it's fleeting. It goes so fast.
Yeah,
it really does go fast. Even though it's the same rate of time passing, that hasn't changed. But there's something about aging and perspective and perception of time that is really different. Well, this has been a lot of fun to talk about. I love that you had so many pivots and insights in your journey. How can people best get a hold of you?
So the best way to get a hold of me, is either at www.beyondthehourlyrate.com or www.sweetspotbusinesscoaching.co.nz.
Got it. Perfect. Oh, you say Z just like the Canadians. I'm in Canada, and that is one thing I won't say. I'm from the States, and I just find that Z rhymes and it's easier. And I struggle with Z. So I decided I'm not going to challenge myself. I'm not going to say it. I'm just going to go with Z.
Good for you. Put a stake in the ground on that one.
I did. That's so funny. But yeah, you said Z and it sounded great. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time today and sharing all of this. I really appreciate how open you were to figuring out what you wanted and to really build your business with such intention to support those values. That was really fun to hear about.
My pleasure. It's been great talking to you today. And thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, you're so welcome. All right. That is it for now. If you're listening and loving what you hear, please like and subscribe. And of course, reviews are great too and much appreciated. And if you're a woman in the middle who's 50 or over and an entrepreneur and would also like to come on the show, just go to www.midlifeinterviews.com and fill out an application. We'd love to have you on to share your story. Thanks so much for listening. It's never too late for you to put yourself on your agenda. I'm Suzy Rosenstein, and I'll talk to you again soon. Now, real quick before we say goodbye, if you are connecting with this show, I'd love to invite you to a happiness breakthrough coaching session. It's my laser-focused coaching call that will help you get clear about what's getting in your way as a woman in the middle entrepreneur and confident about your next steps to more happiness in your next chapter. Head over to www.nextchapterbreakthrough.com. Talk to you soon.